Welcome back to Close Up, and we're going to dive right back into the race for governor now with the Republican nominee, former U.S. Senator Kelly Ayotte. Senator, thanks for coming in.
Glad to be here, Adam.
So those swing and undeclared voters are going to decide this race for governor. Why haven't we seen a more overt effort from you to reach out to those potential Harris-Ayotte voters? Because we know they're out there and they could end up deciding this race.
I meet them every day, actually, Adam, because I'm out campaigning, at the pumpkin festivals, at Poutine Festival. Last weekend we were up in River Fire up in Berlin. So I'm just out talking to voters, and then obviously at the Rotaries, business meetings, small businesses. I was just with a small business in Nashua this week. So that's kind of the New Hampshire campaigning. And you meet voters, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, so you get to talk to them about what you stand for and why this race is so important for governor.
And how do you match up, though, if somebody's going to cross the ticket like that? With a
I match up, in this way. First of all, what's happening in New Hampshire and the path that Governor Sununu has had us on is a good path for New Hampshire. We're prospering, we're growing, we're thriving. They love the New Hampshire advantage. They want us to protect that economic advantage we have, our quality of life, our emphasis on really focusing on our state and making sure that we take on the housing challenge, that we strengthen our mental health system, that we support our first responders. So those issues they're not partisan issues. These are the issues we talk about every day that impact the governor's race.
You mentioned housing. It seems like your opponent, Joyce Craig, has shifted gears in her attacks a little bit. It's less about abortion, more about housing now, and your service on the corporate board of Blackstone, which is the nation's largest commercial landlord. Blackstone does have a documented history of some aggressive rent hikes, sometimes above market average in some reports. Now, Joyce has used the same attack line over and over again, that you are somehow profiting off of the housing crisis. But what I want to know is, in that corporate boardroom, have you ever raised concerns that Blackstone might be doing things that are not the best for working families?
Well, Adam, first of all, this is what Joyce does because she wants to attack the private sector. And I think it's important for your viewers to understand that Blackstone has 2 hotels, 1 student housing a piece in Durham. So they're really not doing much in New Hampshire at all. And by the way, when we had that difficult situation for so many renters in COVID, Blackstone was a company that actually didn't evict anyone in those 2 years. So this is a situation where we need to bring the private sector to the table. It's why the home builders have endorsed me in this race. It is what we need to do if we want to build in this state. And I'll be able to do that with my prior government experience, where obviously that federal experience where I fought for low-income housing tax credits, but also the private and the state, making sure we overhaul that state process. So I'm going to work very hard on this housing issue and bring that experience to bear to make sure that we are giving everyone an opportunity to have affordable housing in the state. Business
in America is about making a profit, but do you think Blackstone is a force for good in the U.S. housing market?
Listen, I think that they are a company that it's important they invest in housing. That's critical. If we don't have the private sector investing in these issues, then how are we going to build more supply? But they're not really involved in New Hampshire. And in New Hampshire, here's what we're going to do. We are going to overhaul the state permitting process to make that much better, because unfortunately projects are being hung up there. I just heard a story from a home builder, a year plus. So we'll make that a 60-day process. We'll also fight for more infrastructure funds to help those communities adding affordable housing with water, with sewer, with roads. And we're going to be a partnership to make sure that there's more housing in the state.
But these people pay you a lot of money. Can you say they're a positive force in this market?
Adam, again, this race is about what we can do here in New Hampshire and what we can bring to bear, the people to get this done for housing. And that's what I'm going to do. And by the way, Joyce Craig, she likes to criticize the private sector. I've had the chance to chair the board of BAE Systems, our largest manufacturing employer. And if you think about that kind of experience of making sure that you understand how do we make those partnerships to get things done in the state, I have that experience. She doesn't.
Simple yes or no question on the issue of abortion. Are you still pro-life?
Adam, first of all, we all have strong personal feelings about these issues. I support the abortion law in New Hampshire. I got into this race. I said it. You interviewed me from day one in the primary. I've said the same thing. We have a consensus here in New Hampshire. Women have up to 6 months for any reason to obtain an abortion. In the last 3 months, if God forbid, a woman has a medical emergency or her baby suffers from a fatal fetal anomaly, she can still obtain an abortion. And if something more restrictive comes to my desk as governor, I will veto it.
I'm just confused about how to talk about this now, because Governor Sununu is pro-choice, but you support the exact same policies he does.
Listen, I think we all have very strong personal feelings, and I respect those. But the important thing as governor is to bring people together around hard questions. And that's what I think, as we look at our abortion law, there's a consensus. And I respect that consensus, and I will fight to preserve that consensus.
The State Department of Energy, founded by Governor Sununu, they have a lot of contracts that they get through the Executive Council, but there's not a lot of forward-facing public engagement and on the issues that matter most of, decreasing costs and making sure there's high supply. I'm not really sure that's changed either. So what we do know, though, is that it grew state government. Does Governor Ayotte consider eliminating the Department of Energy?
Adam, first of all, I want to make sure that we lower energy costs for the people of New Hampshire. That has to be the priority. So I will have tough questions for that department about what are you doing to help lower rates for consumers. I'm going to do that every department, by the way, to make sure that we can be serving the people of New Hampshire as best as possible and do our best. That's got to be our goal every single day. When it comes to energy, we need more energy in this state. And I support an all-of-the-above policy, including natural gas, but also expanding renewables, and then looking forward to new technologies, whether it's hydrogen or small modular nuclear reactors. And so, what is that department doing in terms of making sure that we're looking forward? And those are the questions I'll be asking.
You're a former state attorney general. In 2018, we saw so-called progressive prosecutors elected in Hillsborough and in Merrimack counties. Voters rejected both of them after one term.
Right.
But the AG had to take over in Hillsborough County over allegations of incompetence and non-enforcement of crimes not being effectively prosecuted. Now, the administration of justice can vary a lot county to county based on who is elected into these positions. Does the state need to exercise greater control over the county attorneys to ensure that justice is evenly applied across the state?
Well, when I was Attorney General, I had to do this because you're the chief law enforcement officer. I always brought the county attorneys together regularly, so very regular meetings with them, so that we could be making sure that we were applying consistently the administration of justice in this state. So the Attorney General should be doing that. In addition to that, if there are, issues that need to be addressed with a particular county, you've got to do it, because we want to make sure that the state is protected. We also want to make sure that our laws are enforced and that we're doing that in a tough way, but a fair way.
Let's talk about the issue of trans sports. Obviously, Republicans in Concord are opposed to trans girls competing in interscholastic sports at the high school level. Should they be given other opportunities or just told, play with the boys?
Well, actually, Adam, there are other opportunities. I can tell you where my son goes to high school, there are sports that are co-ed. Multiple sports that are co-ed. So there should be opportunities. I want every child to participate in sports. But when it comes to girls' sports, being the mother of a daughter who played 3 varsity sports, I just want to make sure that it's fair for the girls who are playing and competing, and they work really, really hard in their sport. So that's what that issue is about. But of course, we want the opportunities for all children to participate.
I want to touch on one national issue before we get towards wrapping up here. Donald Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, decorated Marine Corps general, recently said that he thinks Trump meets the definition of a fascist and will try to rule as a dictator if he's elected. How familiar are you with General Kelly from your time in the U.S. Senate?
I know General Kelly, yes, because he was the commander of Southcom when I was in the Senate.
You find him to be an honorable and truthful man?
Well, I can tell you that General Kelly, he's a Gold Star father, too, so of course I'm from a military family, so I do respect him and his service, of course.
Does it give you any concern, then, when he says something about this like Donald Trump?
Well, listen, I think that there have been, as you know, I have a documented history with President Trump, but when I look at this election and I compare objectively the records of the Trump administration versus Harris and Biden in terms of energy costs, securing the border, and the costs on Americans, I think that the records really, the Trump administration thinks we're better off. In terms of this race, though, the governor's race, the most important thing is that the next governor work with anyone in the White House, regardless of party, if they're doing good things for New Hampshire. But if they're doing something bad for New Hampshire, the job of governor is to fight for this state, no matter who is in that corner office, and that's what I will do as governor.
Do you disagree with his assessment, though, that Trump meets the definition of a fascist?
Well, again, I'm focused on this governor's race, and certainly I respect General Kelly, but every day I'm out there campaigning on the issues like housing, taxes, public safety, and it's really important that the people of New Hampshire understand. We've got the drama at the White House level, but what's going to happen here in our state? Are we going to keep this state on the path that Governor Sununu has had us on? That's what this election is all about. And whoever gets elected president, again, I'll work with them when they're doing good things for New Hampshire, but I'll fight them with everything I have. I don't care about that in terms of party if they're not doing the right thing for the people of New Hampshire.
All right, Senator Ayotte, thanks for joining us on Close Up, and we'll see you next for the Granite State debates.
Yeah, thanks, Adam.
All right, thank you.
Great
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
All right, and stay with us after the break, our one-on-one interview with U.S. House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries.